Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and start the public session of our meeting. The board did call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock and went into executive session. So we'll begin our public session, and I ask you to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And as we get started, I'd like to remind everybody of our mission and vision in the district. As a board, the five of us are elected to represent our entire community, which represents approximately 5,739 students, 800 staff members, and 35,000 community members. We use our mission and vision to guide us. Our mission is to create a culture of academic excellence through inclusive and innovative learning opportunities for the whole child. And our vision is to empower all learners to reach their full potential in a globally competitive world. I need a motion for the approval of the agenda, which includes addendum, personnel consent addendum 2D, E, F, and item 3.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Weber?
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
and Mr. Ballant.
Aye, the agenda is approved. I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, minutes are approved. Mrs. Weber, if you could give us a brief overview of the protocol for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ballant. Thank you to all of you for attending our meeting this evening. We are so excited to have all of you here and can't wait for your performance this evening and for recognizing you for your wonderful achievements. For those of you who are attending our meeting in our virtual audience, you can find the agenda for this evening's meeting and the Board of Education website at sycamoreschools.org. The minutes that were just approved by the Board of Education will also be posted out on our website. For those of you who would like to participate in our virtual audience, in the public participation section to address the board, please send those requests to Christian Long, who is our moderator this evening. His email address is longc@sycamoreschools.org. At this point, I do not have any requests for public participation. So we will go on with our meeting.
Great, thank you very much. First item on the agenda, Mr. Lewis, if you'd like to introduce our students from Montgomery Elementary.
Actually, I'm going to let Dr. Debelak, our great principal, introduce her wonderful students. And I will say, as Dr. Debelak comes up, I got the opportunity to see the show live in person. It was an awesome show. I wish, it's one of those things that around this district, it amazes me the talent of students that we have in this district. And congratulations to the students and their volunteers that work so hard with them to put on this show. So Dr. Debelak.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I would love to introduce you to our wonderful 3rd and 4th grade performers who performed The Lion King for us. Our fantastic PTO supports the arts at Montgomery, and we have a 3rd and 4th grade performance every fall, and we have a 2nd and 1st grade performance every spring. So this fall, we enjoyed The Lion King, our first Friday in November, and they performed for our students during the afternoon and then our parents in the evening. So without any further ado, I introduce you to The Lion King. Come on up, guys.
I was going to say, I'll tell you what, why don't we move over there and let's see that way we can see. That was awesome. Again, I liked seeing it even a second time. So I did notice that you made a mention in your song about lack of hair. Were you talking about me in your song? Oh, okay, good, good. Because I don't want to be king, so that's okay. I'll take that. So why don't we have you each introduce yourselves, what grade you're in, and we'll go down the line.
I'm in third grade and my name's Emmy. I'm in fourth grade and my name is Kate Whitmer. My name's Denny and I'm in third grade.
My name is Layla Khalifi and I'm in fourth grade.
My name's Josie Pitcher and I'm in third grade. My name's Nora Jacob and I'm in third grade. My name's Reagan Williams and I'm in third grade.
Let's give these students one more round of applause. And who helped direct you to learn all these great songs and all these great dance moves? All of you. Were there any adults involved in that? Are they here today? Oh, okay. All right. Just you. Just you. How about the parents? How about your parents? Are they here? Can we have the parents please stand and be recognized? We want to give you a round of applause. And I just want to say to the parents, thank you for dedicating the time and effort. And I'm sure practice schedules and running them back and forth and the amount of time that it takes to do something like that. So thank you so much for that. So now I'm sure you want to stay for the whole rest of the meeting, right? And you want to sit and listen and participate. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think your parents are going to be okay with that. So, but thank you for being here. And Dr. Debelak, thank you for getting us back on track. We love having student performances before or at the beginning of a board meeting because boy, it sets the tone. It's the high point of a meeting. So thank you for doing that.
I thought our policy was going to be High Point.
I'm sure board policy will be a high point as well.
Okay, Mr. Lewis, our next item of recognizing and honoring our veterans.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, I know that we did some things on social media and we try to always recognize our veterans. Our students perform and move about the community to recognize our veterans where, you know, whether it's at the Blue Ash Veterans Memorial or the Blue Ash celebration that E.H. Green always participates in every year. And I know individual schools also do a lot to recognize veterans, but I just wanted to take a moment to, you know, say thank you to the people that continue to serve our community and our students that work for us that are veterans. So Mr. Long, if you can show, we're just going to quickly, you know, Mr. Corteal at our high school served in the U.S. Navy. Mrs. Fritz, who serves at Blue Ash Elementary in the Navy. Mr. Hughes, who's in our maintenance department as an HVAC technician from the Navy. Mr. Foster as a Marine working as our support services director in our office. And Mr. Lewis, one of our bus drivers, Mr. Bessie, who's a custodian at Montgomery Elementary, and then Mr. Timon, another bus driver here in our district. Mrs. Brandenburg, who works at our high school, Mr. Lee, who's a coach at our high school, Mr. Spicer, who's a mechanic in our transportation department, Mr. Varner, who works at our high school, Mr. Murray, who's at McMurray, who's at our transportation department, Mr. Powell, a teacher at our high school, and Mr. Villani, who works in our media center at Sycamore High School and Sycamore Junior High. So just wanted to take a moment to not only thank them for their service, but thank them for their continued service of our students. And these are just a couple of pictures of our students recognizing veterans in their school. This was at Montgomery Elementary from an event that was held on Veterans Day. So thank you not only to our staff, but all the rest of the veterans that live in our community that continue to serve our country. We appreciate you.
And I would just like to add, Mrs. Bitter, myself, and Mrs. Wagner had the opportunity to go to the Blue Ash Veterans Day ceremony, and the students at E.H. Green did a tremendous job recognizing our veterans and making our school very proud. So thank you to them and to all the teachers and administrators that worked with that program. Okay,
All
next
right.
on to our band and orchestra recognition.
Yeah, we get another opportunity to recognize some great students from our high school band and orchestra and all-state recognition. So if you can go to the next slide, Mr. Long, I'm going to ask Dr. Ewing to come up. He's going to be a part of our meeting anyway, but I'll let Dr. Ewing in his role as music supervisor have an opportunity to introduce and recognize these great students.
We're really proud of these students. This is kind of a culmination, even though some of them are just beginning their high school careers. This is a culmination of a lot of work and a great honor to be recognized in the All-State Band or All-State Orchestra. The process, just so you know, is sending in a video recording or audio recording in the spring of the previous year. It's reviewed over the summer and then they're nominated. They'll be performing as part of these ensembles at the OMEA State Conference at the beginning of February. So I had to have 9 students in these ensembles is quite an accomplishment. It's a lot. It's the most that we've ever had at Sycamore that any of us could remember, dating way back. And it represents, even though this sounds like a small number, when you think of it across the state of Ohio, it's a little over 5% of the total ensembles. So yeah, we're well represented in terms of the scope of the state. But I'd like to invite these students to come up and have a little certificate for them and just give an opportunity to recognize their achievements. Ben Cecilio in orchestra.
Ben, do you want to stay up here, Ben? We're going to get a picture of all of you. Thank you, Ben. And your great tie.
What instrument you play? Just, I'm just curious.
I play the viola.
I'll add that when as we go along. Daniel Che couldn't be with us. He is ill and he plays clarinet. Caitlin Chang plays flute. Shannon Chang plays clarinet. Matthew Dresnan plays clarinet. Haley Hahn could not be with us this evening. Also, she plays flute. Kristen Shetty plays horn. Ella Sweeney plays bassoon. And Jihye Wu plays cello.
Dr. Ewing, how many hours of practice does it take to get into an all-state band or orchestra? Too many to count. Well, students, I just want to say congratulations on your honor. We know the amount of work that you put into being able to get to that level, and that speaks volumes for your work ethic. Just the amount of time that you spend honing your craft, and obviously it's serving you well to be in the top 5% or representing 5% of the statewide band or orchestra. That's incredible. So also kudos to Dr. Ewing, the rest of the music department. I see Mr. Blankenship back there. So thank you for your work with our students, because without you supporting them and their great parents supporting them, these would be difficult. So I learned a valuable lesson as an orchestra parent last night. I was dragging around a bass around a crowded high school. It was not fun. So I can only imagine the amount of times you've drug an instrument onto a bus or put it in a car, or I heard somebody was playing a horn. I can imagine that's not an easy instrument to drag around. So I have a new appreciation for, even more appreciation for the work that you have to do. So again, congratulations, and we're so proud of you. Now, I know that you also want to stay for this exhilarating part of the meeting, but if you don't, and you have homework probably to do, so we will understand. They probably do have to practice their instruments, but we will completely understand if you can't stay with us, so.
Okay, we'll move on to our superintendent's agenda, Mr. Lewis.
And starting us off, Dr. Ewing again, he's going to give us an overview of the music program here at Sycamore Community Schools. And I know that you all know this because you all have participated in different ways in music performances and have gone to see them. But I do think it is always valuable that we hear about and really from the experts that work every single day to build our program. And Dr. Ewing is a huge support to our music students, music teachers, and he's obviously one of those music teachers, but he's going to tell you about some of the amazing accomplishments, but also just kind of really the nuts and bolts overview of what do we have here at Sycamore and what makes it special. So Dr. Ewing.
It's a pleasure to be with you tonight and to have this opportunity to tell you about what we do, and that you're a part of it. It's a large network that is necessary to make the great music program that we have happen. It of course takes talented and dedicated students like we heard with the Lion King and with these all-state students, but we also have talented teachers who work really, really hard and care deeply for their students. We have the parents who are so supportive and drive their kids around, take them to lessons, take them to events, cheer them on. And it also takes a supportive administration and Board of Education, which we are very grateful to have to make all of this happen. So tonight, what I'd like to talk about is really what our music program is about, how it fits into the district, who's part of it and how they're involved. And I think hopefully you'll leave knowing more about what we do and how it results and what we have. When we think about what we do in music and how it meets our district mission, vision, and values, I've highlighted in yellow the words that I think are done particularly well in the music program. We're always striving for excellence, and we don't strive for perfection. It's not attainable, but excellence and increasing levels of excellence are always attainable. We do create an environment that is inclusive and innovating. Everyone is welcome in our music programs, and we really address the education of the whole child through our music programs. And we nurture their social emotional learning as well as their artistic education. And the way music works with the brain, it really brings together many different disciplines at once. It's important to all of our teachers in our whole program that we empower our learners. And as they get even older through junior high and high school, they do more of what we call chamber music experiences, where it's small groups of instruments, small groups of singers who work together and learn how to make musical decisions on their own and in a group and deal with all the things, the collaboration and cooperation that we have to deal with as adults, but they get the opportunity to do it younger. So it's very empowering to them to go through those decision-making processes. And then we really hit, I think, all of our values, our district values: academic excellence, diversity and inclusion, community, character, and collaboration through our full music program. And when I look at the portrait of a Sycamore graduate, again, highlighted in yellow, are the things that that are part of the portrait of the Sycamore graduate. But to break it down a little bit more, critical thinking and problem solving are a big part of making music. And it's not just reflective. It can be reflective, but the thing that makes music really important in critical thinking and problem solving is that it happens in real time, in the moment. Students are constantly having to make decisions about what they're doing and what they're going to do next. And the clock doesn't stop. It just keeps going. So that's a really important aspect of what we do in music. We set goals. We set goals as a group. We set goals for individuals. And we don't always meet the goals. So working toward those goals and then learning how to handle it when we don't achieve the goals is an important part of music making, and it really happens on a daily basis. Students will make mistakes in class every day, and they get the opportunity to think about, well, what caused that mistake and how can I do better next time. We help our students to have confidence in communication. They perform for each other, they perform for audiences, and that just builds their confidence as they achieve. And through the experiences with the large group and the small groups that I discussed, they become empathetic collaborators. And by in relation to that, being vulnerable and performing for others and allowing others to hear what they do really helps them to grow empathy and feel confident in expressing themselves, and that helps them to develop into respectful global citizens. So now here's some numbers, and these are kind of averages, so they fluctuate a little bit, but believe it or not, they're kind of on the uptrend for the last 2 or 3 years. K through 6, all students are involved in music. Once they get to the Green School, they have the opportunity to participate in general music, band, orchestra, or choir. And at Green, they can choose 2. So that's where, if you do all adding up the numbers, it's more than the student population at Green. And that's because we have a large number of students who do 2 musics, which we're really pleased with. General music, you can see that in 5th and 6th grade is a large number. And then band and orchestra are even higher than 300 and 200 this year, but that's been kind of an average over the last 5 years, as well as choir as well. About 90% of the junior high students participate in music. And you can see we have also, we changed the terminology from general music to elective music. And once they get to the junior high, elective music gives students who might not want to be part of a performing ensemble still the opportunity to study music, whether they have public performance anxiety or they just really want to learn guitar or piano. They have the opportunity to choose those pathways in music as well. And that extends on into the high school. And I think when you see the proportion there of elective music students, you can see that many students at the high school choose that individual pathway to kind of grow their own interests, as well as being part of the band and orchestra and choir. This gives an overview of what our course offerings are in terms of curriculum, what's taught during the school day in each of the school buildings. We are excited next year to begin music production in the junior high, which will allow a stronger basis of knowledge for those students once they get to the high school, and then we can expand and deepen their learning opportunities at the high school in the area of music production.
Dr. Ewing, what is an ORF instrument?
An ORF instrument is named from Karl Orff, who was a Hungarian composer and music educator. And he believed that any kid at any age could play an instrument. So he designed instruments that would sound good in any combination, regardless of what notes were played. And most of them are percussion instruments. So if you go to an elementary school concert and you see them hitting what looks like marimbas or xylophones, those are ORF instruments, and they have removable bars. So you can limit what notes can be played, so they can always be agreeable. You don't get notes that clash with each other quite as much. Yeah. So then they're focusing more on rhythm and the coordination of the body and less thinking about, am I playing the right note? Yes. All right, and we can go on to the next one. In addition to the curricular classes, we have a lot of extracurricular opportunities. So those are broken down there by school as well. And some of these are auditioned ensembles. Some of them are open to anybody. And you can see that we have band, orchestra, and choir well represented in each school. The junior high also has one that's just this year ensemble. The Sycamore Elite Singers is the group that is going to perform at Carnegie Hall this spring. So I didn't list them because they're kind of a one-year group, but they are outside the school day. So all of those groups all practice outside the school day. And when you look at all of those groups, you can start to think about the hours it takes for those groups to happen and what our staff does beyond the scope of their regular contract day to make music a special part of these students' lives. The next few slides are kind of going to give you an idea of who is teaching all these students and what their roles are. So when I say comprehensive general music, I'm talking about general music in the elementary schools and then music electives in the junior high and the high school. So we have one elementary school teacher, one music teacher in each of the elementary schools. And then Kristen Anderson and Joe Dilley are at the intermediate school at Green. And they teach both choir and general music there. And with piano, international world music, and guitar, Abby, Stephanie, and Zach are there. And then those offerings expand at the high school to include music production and history of rock. And then we continue on with piano, guitar, and we add AP music history, which gives students the opportunity to earn AP credit studying a music class. Band involves traveling teachers. And the way we have set up this team is to have one teacher in each building who's there all day long. And then Ryan and Jordan work opposite days. So they will travel, either they'll spend an A day at Green, and then on a B day, they'll travel between the high school and the junior high, which allows them, as Ryan's the percussion specialist and Jordan the brass specialist, allows them the opportunity to really see students develop from 5th grade through 12th grade, and they get to know these students in just a really special way, because that student-teacher relationship lasts for 8 years. Yes. And our choir team is stationary in each building. And they will either alternate grades or work in a team teaching situation, depending on the class. They've been working together for a long time and have produced some really fantastic choirs for many years. So we're grateful to have such an experienced and talented choir team. And the orchestra team also involves traveling teachers. And you can kind of see below, it's a little more complicated. It doesn't lay out quite as simply as the band team does. Mr. Otto is at Green all day, every day. And Dr. Santangelo and Mrs. Denny they travel between the high school and the junior high every day. And then depending on what day it is and what students need from day to day, Stephanie, Lynn, and I travel between the buildings as well. And this kind of shows you this year some of the honors that our students have achieved. These are all auditioned groups, either state or regional. And we're just really proud that that they've achieved such a high level of accomplishment, but B, that they're willing to audition for groups and go out and play places that aren't home. They'll go farther out. And then the bottom line just kind of indicates over the last 3 years, the connection between music and academic success, with more than half of the National Merit semifinalists being involved in music. And there's lots of research into the connection between academic success and musical success, and none of it really leads to causation, but the connections are deep and complicated, and there may not be causation, but there is, as you can see, certainly correlation between the outstanding performances in the academic world as well as the musical world. That's all I have. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I would just like to make one comment to your booster organizations are also really wonderful and do so much to give just that extra opportunities for our kids. Your band and orchestra boosters. I've also been a part of your vocal boosters too over the years, and they really do a lot of great things and for our kids and supporting our program. So if you could just also give them a big thank you, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. They work really hard to put on events that raise money and support, whether it be cabaret or the craft show coming up this Saturday at the high school, or the variety show at the high school. It's a very active and supportive group of people.
What time does that craft show start?
Starts at 9 a.m. at the high
9 a.m.
school.
Be there. That's our shameless plug
Yes.
online here.
And you'll have the opportunity to hear chamber groups of 3 to 5 students who have coached themselves and learned music, and they're going to kind of roam around the craft show. It'll be a little different format than it's been in the past.
Dr. Ewing, I would just like to thank you for coming to highlight the amazing talent of our students and the support staff that we have. I mean, we have an incredible music and choir program in our district that is continually recognized year after year for the amazing work that everybody does. So thank you for the update. It's been a while since we had you here, so we'll have to have you back more frequent.
And we'll bring some performers next time.
Oh, I love it. I'd just like to add on a personal note, Dr. Ewing and Mr. Blankenship and all the staff who's not here. I can say firsthand what a difference you've made in my daughter's life, both of you. And the countless hours that if you're associated with any of these organizations, you know, that are put in behind the scenes. So because the difference you make in students, I wanted to thank you both. And if you could please pass that along to your staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am so proud and amazed at the staff when I see them interact with students and the caring relationships they have with students, and just their talent is unbelievable. And that's really where the rubber meets the road on all of this is these great teachers. So, yeah.
I'd just like to say, my children have also benefited from this. They're now in college. I'm always so amazed at such a young age with our, little elementary school students who will just stand up in front of an audience and just start singing. I mean, I don't think I could do that now as an adult, but I would like to tell you, we just came from a Ohio School Board Association conference, and there's always a lot of talk about how school districts really should invest in the arts and music programs. And, I have to say that I like being there because I know how important it is to our community. And by just sort of seeing all of the information that you presented tonight and the opportunities that our students have and the amazing staff that support them, we are really, really proud of everything that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All
We
right.
really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
If you want.
How are you going to top that, Mr. Lovell?
There is no way I can top that. Although I will say,
Okay, we will move on.
we are
to our-
designing beautiful spaces for all our music and arts classes to be a part of. So it's phenomenal. I'm not singing now.
Thank you.
Good night.
So we're on item number 2 then.
Yes, we will move on to our master facility plan and always an aviator update.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lovell and
So-
Mrs. Weber.
We'll go ahead and roll to the next slide there, Mr. Long. Thank you. So just really quickly, just a junior high update. There's a lot of words up here. I'm not going to read them all to you this evening, but it just kind of gives you an overview of the work and the progress happening at the junior high. And I would be remiss not to mention, as I just stated, that any time you get a chance to go into the junior high, I'd be happy to take you around. One of the highlight areas of the junior high is that music and arts wing. It is just absolutely incredible, the spaces that have been designed. And so, like I said, I look forward to being able to take folks in there and walk around and see those spaces. But over at the junior high, you'll see some of the big things that are happening up there. They're finalizing a lot of the brick and the veneer around the building, specifically related around that theater area. If you go into the academic wings, a lot of the casework has already been installed. That's your cabinets and storage areas and things like that. I know Mr. Lewis and I had the opportunity to walk around with Mrs. Shunk and some junior high students, and it just felt open almost. Like it was a weird feeling in that academic area, having students in there, but seeing the spaces and the paint on the walls, which was a really cool feeling. The auditorium concrete seating base has been installed. So when you walk into the theater and you look up into the seating, it actually looks like a theater at this point. You can see a lot of the catwalks that are going in up on the ceilings, really kind of defining that space. And the final grading is happening on the east side of the building. So where the former tennis courts are. So that side of the building, if you were to look over there, is actually looking kind of final grade. And then last, I think a lot of people have asked kind of what's happening there in front of the building by the maintenance. That's where we're doing all of our sanitary tie-ins. And those are all getting completed at this time. So things progress at the junior high, a lot of action over there on the site. Looking forward to just keeping things moving and starting the demolition process this spring, late spring on the old junior high. So it'll be a fun transition. All right, transportation compound. This project, we kind of went gangbusters right when we had gotten the green light to do some site development. They had kind of leveled it, done a lot of the preliminary site development work out there. Then there was somewhat of a law. If you've been out there recently or have driven by recently towards Grooms Road, you'll see that there are mountains of gravel. What they're working on right now is the underground detention So as you know, on most sites, like most of our schools, we have above ground detention, so storm water. On that site, because it was so small with the 5 acres, that's all going to be underground. So you can see the piping that they're leading out there for the bladder system that will go underground to be able to capture that water. So things are progressing nicely out there. And you'll also notice on the agenda today, which we'll talk about here shortly, is that we will have the temporary facility lease extension in front of you. So if you remember last year, that extension or that, I'm sorry, original agreement went through December 1st. So this will allow us to get through June until our property opens. But things to be seem to be moving well out on that site, and no real other updates for you at this time. Before we get to Always an Aviator, I would also mention, I think this is kind of exciting. I was talking to Jerry Durr, our owner's rep today, and he was mentioning the high school. We are at the point coming up that we will be demolishing the temporary classrooms on phase 8. So we have gone full circle at the high school. And so it's something to be celebrated. So the last part of our construction, so all of our academic areas will be open come late this month, which it's already late, but at the end of this month. And we'll start on the administrative areas and then move towards the completion of our interior athletics on that side of the building. So it's kind of exciting to be able to say that we've made it. We went full circle at the high school.
Mr. Lovell, once we get through interior athletics in the main office, really all that remains at that point is the natatorium, correct?
There's actually one tiny phase that will occur at the end of next year, and that's the old front entrance where the office was by the theater. That area will get redone, the bathrooms will get made over, and that old office area turns into what we call like a community room for PTO and groups to use. But yes, the only thing remaining at the high school at that point would be the natatorium and the front entrance. So the front entrance is complete, but if you notice, we didn't do the work on that kind of north loop. All of that site work will get completed once the natatorium finalizes.
And when you say end of the year, is it end of the calendar year or end of the school year for that?
Into the school
small
year.
part?
So it would be
Okay.
this summer.
This summer.
coming summer. Mhm.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other thing that we wanted to share with you is just that, as you can see, our Always an Aviator leadership team has expanded a little bit. So Mitch Allen is a Sycamore grad who played in our football program. He is going to be assisting Michael Matthews with helping us lead the campaign along with our head football coach, Mr. DeTillo, and looking at how we can increase the funds being raised for those field houses, locker rooms, some of those additional finishes that we would like at our stadium. Louisa Serda and Mark Seeger will be leading our natatorium team. And as you know, the Seeger family with their generous donation, along with the Serda Foundation, picked up a good portion of the cost along with the school district. So they're really close to that finish line. So they're excited to bring us the rest of the way. Lee Chamness and Steve Imhoff are baseball, softball. So Lee came onto our team recently, and she brought a tremendous amount of fundraising experience and knowledge about fundraising. So it was a breath of fresh air at one of our meetings. She was just like firing ideas at us, and we couldn't get enough. And then Sean Fitzgibbons is going to help with the baseball facility with Mr. Imhoff. And then Dr. Adrian James, who you're all familiar with, is our honorary chair of the campaign. So what we are very excited about is we're organized. We have some plans. We have some things that we're ready to put into play. And we anticipate within probably about the next 2 weeks, you will see a reinvigoration and kickoff. Dr. Steger, when we kick it off, you will recognize possibly some of the information that we put out. So I'll just say the magic day is November, I think 29th, which is I think it's called the National Day of Giving. So we thought that would be a great time to be back out, really reinvigorating our campaign and getting people excited about our fundraising efforts. So we have a lot of work to do in the next 2 weeks, certainly with the Thanksgiving holiday interrupting that time frame. But in our minds, I think people are ready. They just need to know the what and the why. And so we're ready to give them that information. So Mrs. Weber, any other comments?
Just a few things I'd like to add, a few other activities that we've had. Dr. James and Louisa Cerda and I traveled, actually, Mrs. Cerda lives in Columbus, but we visited and met with the chair of Upper Arlington's Legacy Campaign. They raised about, I think, almost $8 million for their private funding campaign. So got a lot of good ideas. And really talked with them about strategy. They gave us a lot of their materials and forms so that we can utilize those as well within our work. I'm scheduled to meet with Mr. Imhoff and Mrs. Chamness this Friday because they have some next steps in advertising that they would like to do with their baseball softball project, and they're really great to watch them coordinate their efforts in moving forward. So excited, as Mr. Lewis noted, a really great meeting and kind of a different take on maybe some things that we can do to support the campaign from the addition of Mrs. Chamness. You're going to see one item on tonight's agenda that also will give some support for the baseball softball effort, and that we're going to ask you to approve an agreement or a proposal to start getting some preliminary renderings and visuals for the baseball and softball projects to really help support that fundraising effort. So that's a proposal that I believe Mr. Lovell will discuss when we get to that portion of the agenda. So I feel like there's been really great progress in the last couple of weeks, and we want to try to continue that so that we can get some 2022 giving, if at all possible, and be ready to really keep going in next year as we continue to see enhancements to our athletic facility.
Thank you very much. The only other thing that I will add is a reminder that this coming Monday, we have our open house at Green, right? From
Yes, we do.
3:30 to 6, I believe,
Correct.
that we invite the community to come out to.
We
Yeah,
do.
4:30 is the time capsule burial and kind of ceremony. So
Yep. Thank you for that. Great reminder.
a lot going on, as always.
Excellent. All exciting stuff. Speaking of master facility and construction, we get to our favorite part of the meetings of change orders. I need a motion for the change order Sycamore Junior High construction project.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Dr. Steger.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant
Aye.
and Mrs. Bitter. Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the MSA design, MSA sport.
So moved.
Second.
As Mrs. Weber had noted during the Always an Aviator update, this is somewhat of our first step in the master design process for the baseball and softball fields. And so, as we all know, that has been a part of the bigger vision of the complex out there. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to take that first step to initiate the process of the master design, the master facility. Mr. Lewis, myself, Mr. Harden, and others met out. Mr. Hinkie met out on the property. Gosh, when was that, Mr. Lewis? It seems like
Probably about a month ago.
about a month ago, to really walk the area and really talk about the needs and the desires. And one of the things that we keep talking about is how do we do this in a way that the vision is casted and we can work towards that vision through fundraising efforts? So kind of looking at the whole and then working partly to get to that. MSA is a design firm that is specifically geared towards sports facilities. This is their thing. This is what they specialize in. They have worked with major league facilities to other high school facilities. across the state, the region, and the country. And so we were excited to be able to meet with them and for them to be able to come back and bring this proposal to us. And again, this is a first step in the proposal. This is for them to be able to start the process of looking at what would this plan be? And then the next step would be able to come back to them if we desired to then go through that process of getting those 50% drawings.
Just to add, though, I do believe we would go through a second step in that process with an RFQ
We
for
would.
architect services.
Yes, thank you.
You're
yeah.
welcome.
Just for my clarification, Mr. Lovell,
Yes.
is the stakeholder input about this in advance of this work, concurrent with this work, or after this work?
It is in advance and concurrent with this work. So there was a lot of feedback that was given prior to this, that when we met with MSA, and then as we initiate this process, there is similar to how we've approached the natatorium, is bringing the feedback in to really talk about what is desired out of our facilities, what makes sense for our facilities, and then from there, that will influence those drawings.
Okay, and then my second question, because they could go a lot of directions on this.
Absolutely.
On the price point, if you will, on the design. Do we have a general theme on what we're targeting? I mean, it could go a lot of different heights for the baseball fields between the
Yeah.
kind of turfs, the kind of.
And those were a lot of the questions. You're absolutely right. You could, like we learned with the stadium, you can get very expensive very quick. I don't think in the conversations that we're having, and Mr. Lewis, you're more than welcome, obviously, to jump in. There is somewhat of a common idea of what we believe would be best of class for our facility and what we need. There were not a lot of competing thoughts, I believe, when we were walking around. The only thing that I think that we may be challenged on or have to talk about is this idea of what do we turf on our fields? The other piece to that would be, how do we leverage the seating? How do we can coordinate seating between the two fields and things like that? There's always an opportunity for the price to go up, but I think what we want to do is we want to create the master plan. And in our minds, we're thinking, let's put out there what we want, what we think we need and we want out of this complex. And then how do we approach this in different levels and be able to build onto it over time? And that's really the mindset that MSA has when they do their design and when they think through these master plans, is we know we may not be able to get all the money right now, but this is the big vision of where we desire to go. Mr. Lewis, do you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, it's kind of like doing a good, better, best, so that our community and our donors would understand, like, if we only get to this level, this is all we're going to be able to do. If we go to this level, because you're right, Mr. Comerford, we could go to, I've heard ideas of, we'd like to have a batting tunnel added on to the field house at the stadium, because it's right there next to the baseball field. So, okay, well, what does that look like if we do something like that? What would that cost? So we're trying to layer it so that people know, if we donate to this level, this is what we'll get. Because I think it'll help with some of the confusion that I think we've learned from, is that if
Right.
people don't know what they're getting, they don't know what to donate. Now we're kind of taking the reverse approach, is here's everything you can get if we get the donations to this level, and then each level below that. So
I
to
would
really help
say-
them understand.
And I would say it's the mindset we desired to have with the stadium that we couldn't necessarily achieve, that we've now taken a step back with MSA and said, how do we do this from a structural point from the beginning of the process?
That's terrific, and I'm glad we learned from our experiences.
Yes.
Mrs. Weber, how is the 24,500 funded?
That will be through the capital improvement budget.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
I apologize. Who made the motion on this one? Mrs.
I did,
Weiss?
Mrs. Weiss.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Comerford?
Aye.
Mr. Ballant?
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter?
Aye.
and Dr. Steger?
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the extension of the lease agreement on Reed Hartman Grooms Development LLC.
So moved.
Second.
I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So just as a reminder, the agreement that we had with the Rehartman Grooms Development LLC for our temporary facility on the old P&G property went through December 1st. We've been working with the team over there that we're currently have the license agreement with to extend that through June and June 30th. And that will give us plenty of time and breathing room to be able to get our new facility open. The team over there, Rehartman Grooms Development, has been phenomenal to work with. So we're very thankful for their partnership and allowing us to maintain the facility out there. We're also, just so you know, we were able to work with the company that's providing our trailer out there. That is our operations center for our transportation department to just continue to extend with no additional charges or inflationary charges to that. So they've been phenomenal to work with as well. So we're excited about being able to just make it through the winter in a predictable fashion so that we can transition to our new facility.
Any additional questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call a roll.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Ballant,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
and Dr. Stuger.
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll move on to the treasurer's consent agenda.
Other.
Oh, sorry, other. Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot, Mr. Ballant. We've mentioned
Keep
the
it moving here.
That's right. The craft show, we've mentioned that. Just want to make sure Saturday, November 19th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Sycamore High School. It's always a great time. So pick up some of those last minute holiday gifts. OSBA conference, just want to mention that and thank the board members and also the administrators that were able to attend. I really felt like it was informational. It was a great team bonding and building experience. And I really enjoyed also presenting with my colleagues, Mr. Lovell and Mrs. Wagner. Definitely had a lot of outreach after our presentation from various people in the room. So that's always, and people didn't get up and leave. So, you know, that's a good sign. So really appreciate that and look forward to attending next year as well with everyone. And appreciate all the time that people spent collaborating and having meetings. And it's always a good time to connect and talk about some of those important things. Frozen Junior was awesome at the high school. If you did not get a chance to see it, I'm sorry you missed out, because the display of talent at our high school every time that we have a performance, and Mr. Wapham does a great job of picking shows that really highlights the talent of our students. So Frozen Junior was a fun and short show. When it was over, I was kind of like, it's over? And I think I was left wanting more, and I think that's a good show. So congratulations to all those students who put on that performance, and look forward to their other performances this year. Fall sports. Wow. I was blown away when I received kind of a summary of what did our athletes do during this fall. We had two coaches that were GMC Coach of the Year, Matt Starr for girls golf, Brian Whistle for boys soccer. So congratulations to them and their teams. Sycamore High School girls water polo finished third in the state. Boys water polo finished fifth in the state. Our girls golf team was first in GMC and seventh in the state, which is pretty impressive. Not to negate all the other students and athletes that made all district, all league teams. There were numerous. Our junior high, 8th grade girls volleyball finished at the top of the GMC in the quarterfinals of the GMC tournament. The 7th grade girls team were in the GMC finals, which is impressive. Tennis team finished third in the GMC. Girls golf finished second in the GMC. Boys golf finished first in the GMC. 7th and 8th grade boys cross country finished second in the GMC, and 7th grade girls finished third. 8th grade girls finished fourth. So bright future for our young athletes there at that level. Let's see. A couple other things that I just wanted to mention, and I would say this is atypical. We usually highlight lots of good news and things in other, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of things that I wanted to inform the board about. One is we have been working hard. I had a parent reach out to me about, having Narcan available in our schools, which is an interesting, the outreach. I was like, well, why would we have Narcan? And I wanted to better understand that. So I reached out to Stacy quickly, because she typically works with our school nurses and also our trainer. Because, I'm thinking about, okay, who would handle this and what would the reason be? And come to find out as you start to do some research that there are brightly colored drugs that are targeting younger students that are laced with fentanyl. And that scares me, and it scares me for our adults, and it scares me for our students. So looking into this has become a more common theme or a more common thing to do in Hamilton County. So we are working collaboratively with our health partner, UC Health, to identify whether or not this is a possibility and whose license does it operate under. And you have to identify the particular individuals in your district who would be the people that would handle it. Obviously, we would work through our medical professionals, either our nurses or our trainers, because it's all about the accessibility. If somebody is in crisis and comes into contact with fentanyl, they're going to need that immediate assistance. So we are working collaboratively with Hamilton County Public Health and also UC Health, and we're also looking at our board policies to make sure we're not doing anything that would take us out of compliance. But I do feel confident that, number one, if we work through Hamilton County, it's free of charge. It would be locked up, and it would be something that would only be accessible to the individuals we identify. Currently, the only person that has access to Narcan is Paul Payne, our school resource officer through the city of Montgomery, and it would be in his cruiser. So we are looking to expand that as part of our program. Replacement Narcan would be free as well through Hamilton County, and they take care of monitoring the expiration dates and getting you the updated Narcan. So I just wanted to report that to the board and let you know that that's something that we're working on. The other thing that we're working on that, and I know this is not going to come as a shock to you, that, I am really concerned as well as Mr. Lovell about our capacity to operate buses. We are getting at that critical point where finding bus drivers, finding subs, just getting staffing. I feel very fortunate as my colleagues around other districts in the state are canceling routes. We have not had to do that, but I will tell you, last week it came very close. We have had to double back and double route and do things like that, but we have not had to cancel a route yet. At one day last week, our entire office staff was driving. Mechanics, Mr. Miller, Mr. Huber, everyone that was available to drive was driving because we got hit by illness. So I just want you to, I don't need an answer, and I'm not bringing you a proposal today, but I just want you to think about your tolerance for, we have discussed some things like to train to be a bus driver takes a significant amount of time. So we've talked about, and we do not currently pay them to train. That's something to me that would be an incentive, because people are coming and have to leave another job. Could we look at paying them? And we need to talk with OPSI about this. We would need to sit down with our union and discuss that, probably an MOU to be able to do all this. But do we start paying our people to train so that they can leave an employment and come to an employment to, really truly sink their teeth into bus driving? And if they do, one of the things we would look at is they would be signing an agreement to drive with us for a period of time to make it, amenable to us. And if they left before that time was up, then they would have to pay, some portion of money back. So we're thinking of things like that. That's just one of a couple of things that we're talking about internally that we think might help the crisis. I will tell you that other districts have done, sign-on bonuses and things like that, and it doesn't seem to be working. I think for us, the people that we have come into contact with that want to join our team just say, look, it would be really hard for me to leave a job and not be getting paid while I'm training for this job. So to me, that's one of those no-brainer things. I think it would help Mr. Miller. But so I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Lovell and I will probably be bringing you a proposal along with Mrs. Weber at some point after we get a chance to talk with our OPSI representatives about how can we make an impact and really start to bring those people on.
Yeah, Mr. Lewis, this, this is not something that's going away anytime soon. We've had this problem for a couple of years now. So I as one would be open to suggestions and proposals on how we could look at
How many hours does it take for training roughly? Do we know?
I know the pre-service class, what did he tell me? It's not just like one class and you're on.
I know
it.
that.
It's like-
I'm just trying to do like a quick back of the envelope calculation. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get the
Whatever.
information. I'd be guessing, but I thought it was like 64 hours or something. I don't, maybe it might be less than that, but there's a lot of variables, but there's pre-service class and on the road training that have to happen before they can become a certified bus driver. Plus they have to test. Like that's another option is right now they have to pay $46 to get their fingerprints, another fee to get their license. They have to pay another fee to take the test. So you're probably at least, I'll say $250, $300 deep before you even get paid to be a bus driver. So those are kind of things that we're thinking about are those opportunities that we could help bridge that gap.
Mr. Lewis, I'm not able to see you most of the time when you're speaking. And you can't see me if I want to say something or at least
Sure.
affirm, is it possible when you are talking about such substantive issues, you can go to in the future,
Sure.
go to the podium so that Dr. Steger and I can be part of this conversation and feel like
Absolutely.
we're part of that. I'm supportive of whatever you need to make that happen, because I feel like this is such an important part for our students and for our school district for you to run this effectively. So, I mean, yeah, figure out what you need and I'm supportive of that.
Quick question. Do we have anyone who is currently certified as an instructor for these courses working at the district?
Certified as an instructor.
Yes.
So we have 3 I think they're called behind the wheel or onboard instructors that do the on the road training. There is only one person in our area that can do the pre-service class and they all have to go to it. And now they're offered regularly, but they have to go to the class to get the training there. Because I've even asked that question, like, can we provide that training? And the answer is no currently, but doesn't mean we're not pushing, because I think Mrs. Weber and Mrs. Weiss and I mentioned that to our state reps the last time we talked. So next time we have a legislative meeting, we will bring it up again. Because I think that is kind of that's very tight to just have one person that's responsible for training all these people when we're in a crisis. So
I would like to add that there was actually a legislative item in the delegate meeting that I attended at the board meeting, and I believe that it was to try to open up some of that
Some
possibility,
opportunity.
because so
That's
many districts are encountering that challenge. So I do believe that there was something there that would potentially help that out. So that's probably a good way to go.
Well, we have a few legislators coming to our green open house, but we want it to be a pleasant opportunity for them. You may just
You
want to
want me to
say we
grab
have a
this
few
or
things
can
we'd like
show?
to have you in the district to discuss. So
well, I appreciate
Never mind.
all of you allowing me to kind of talk about that item. I know that's an unusual place, but it really wasn't an official item today, but I just wanted to kind of see some faces and head nods of whether or not there was any tolerance for that or not. I didn't want to surprise you with an item on the agenda. So just a discussion, and I'm glad there's some support there.
Mrs. Weber, I think that's a personal challenge to me to work it into the conversation on Monday.
thank you. I will try my best.
I have every faith that you can do that.
I believe that. Thank you, Mr. Ballant. That's all I have for other.
Okay, now we will move on to the treasurer's consent agenda. I need a motion for the approval of the treasurer's consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, Mrs. Weber, or questions from the board?
You notice that we do have a rather large transfer from the general fund to our 3 bond retirement funds that are utilized to pay for energy conservation bonds, as well as lease certificates of participation for our district office. Keep in mind that for those energy conservation bonds, those are funded by savings that we have been able to acquire because of having those better improvements to our equipment and better processes in place, and temperature controls and such to be able to fund those bonds.
Anything else from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Hi.
Mr. Bitter, Mrs. Bitter, sorry,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
and Mr. Ballant.
Aye. Treasurer's consent agenda passes. Moving on to the financial report for October 2022. I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
I did want to point out that we have some updates to the master facility plan report so that you can see the impact in the plan for the addition of the natatorium, the funding for that, as well as the cost included for the natatorium. Are there any questions?
It's nice to see that we're finally getting some investment earnings.
It's great. It's not great with all the other things that are the reason why it's happening, because that's driving up our costs some. But it is good to see, and when we get to the point where we're talking about the 5-year forecast, we can see the impact there as well. And it's really helpful for our long-term plan. So,
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Hi.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the 5-year forecast.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. On to the next slide. Thank you all for your patience in reviewing the 5-year forecast this week. I am going to provide the full report to you, but do want to just give you some highlights and a few comments when we think about moving forward with our 5-year plan, and how some recent changes or updates since the last time we looked at this in May have impacted our 5-year financial outlook. The forecast is mandated by the state of Ohio. It's a financial planning tool that we utilize for the general fund. It's also a tool that the state would look at for those districts that would be in financial difficulty, and it helps them to be able to identify school districts that may need to have financial services from the state of Ohio, or also just to make sure that boards of education are doing what they need to do to plan when those situations occur. Fortunately, we are not in that situation. This is really just used for us to be our planning tool for use in the general fund. It helps us make decisions on major items. We'll talk about a few of those that we've made recently when we're looking at utilization of the district's cash reserve. It requires 3 years of historical data. So that goes back to the 2019-20 school year through last year, 21-22. For reference for community members who might be looking at that, for the state as they're looking at that to just see where we've been. But more importantly, it's 5 years of projected data for planning purposes, starting with the current school year through this year. We've added the 26-27 school year. So it's amazing how quickly this time goes by. But that's continues to work through the 5-year plan to make sure that we are thinking about what we might need to do in terms of either looking at changes in our expenditure trend, or also looking potentially at a request to the community for additional dollars for operations. Okay, so just wanted to touch on a few items within the forecast. Primarily, we look at changes in our operating revenue, our operating expenditures. And this time, I also want to make sure that you see the impact on non-operating revenue and expenditures as they are based on some of the decisions we've made recently to utilize the district's cash reserve for capital projects. Moving forward, both our transportation facility, the Seeger Natatorium, and some of the utilization of our cash reserves more for cash flow needs to make these projects happen as well. We've also added some contingency dollars and potentially from our cash reserve to help us finish up the master facility plan. So let's start with this operating revenue. Real estate taxes, no big change from the last time we looked at the forecast. Just one of those things to keep in mind, though, that we will have a countywide reappraisal next year of property values across the district. So that's going to happen in 2023 with any impact on the tax valuations would be for taxes paid in 2024. Because we are a political subdivision, it's not going to actually bring a lot of new revenue into the district if we see large increases in valuations because of Ohio law that negates inflationary increases and make sure that you just receive the same amount of dollars that you would have when the levies were initially passed. We will see some increases in our revenue coming in due to new construction. We're continuing to see that in the district, which is helpful. And we have continued to see growth in some of our public utility personal property tax. And so you would see some changes in that area. We're looking at the additional dollars from the natural gas pipeline, as well as what we've seen in recent years is just historical investment into public utility property across our district. State funding, you do see a bit of an increase in our unrestricted grants and aid. That's basically what we call the foundation funding. We are going to have to keep a close eye on that in this upcoming state budget cycle as the state legislature looks at whether they're going to continue the Fair School Funding Plan. Many of you may have had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about that when we were up at the Ohio School Boards Conference. That's going to be something that we will be focusing on with our new legislators in this upcoming winter, spring for completion by June 30th. I do think that we will continue to see some growth in that area. Number one, because we have enrollment growth in the district. And secondly, because the new formula has provided a phase-in of some additional transportation funding, which is actually what's been impacting us in this last couple of years with our state funding. So more to come. We'll continue to keep you involved. And that may be one of those processes that Mrs. Weiss, if you remain as our legislative liaison, we may have to make a trip to Columbus to have some discussions about that with our legislators. The big area that has impacted our revenue for the upcoming at least a couple of years is that we didn't have in past forecasts is investment revenue. And because of the actions of the Federal Reserve to combat inflation, we have seen significant growth in that area of our funding. While we don't really know whether rates will continue at this level, one of the things that we did take into account in future years is that our balance is going to get less. So there's not going to be as much to invest. So we will see a decline in that amount, in that revenue source over time, just for that reason. But for now, it's great to have those additional dollars that we can utilize to support our programming. Okay. Are there any questions about operating revenue before I move on? Okay. On the expense side, our operating expenses, the big change that is included in the forecast in this year and impacting future years is our health insurance premium increases. We had projected for this year a 9% increase, which was similar to last year. It ended up being a 17.9% increase. So that has had some long-term effects on our budget. That's something that I think we're going to have to look at in the next couple of years, either through potential contributions by staff and or looking at whether we might want to look at an option other than the Butler Health Plan. I will say, though, that I think this increase is something that's happening with many employers right now because of the cost of COVID, because of staffing shortages and the increased cost of providers, which spills over into claims costs. So I don't know that it's necessarily something we're going to be able to solve just by shopping for other options. So more to come on that, but it is something that has probably been the biggest impact on our personnel costs. In terms of non-personnel costs, that would be all of our purchase services, supplies. Those are the big items. We are seeing some increases in those areas of the budget because of inflationary pressures. I'll give you an example, just our transportation for outside sources. For those kids that we can't transport by yellow bus because they need special accommodations or because we just don't have buses available for them, that cost has probably doubled in the last year because of fuel surplus charges and because of staffing challenges. So that's something that has put some pressure on our budget that fortunately we do have those additional investment dollars to help us offset. Are there any questions before we move on from operating expenditures? Okay. No, go back just real quick, Mr. Long. Finally, I want to just make sure that you are aware that we have included impact from non-operating revenue and expenditures. If you look at line 5.01, which is operating transfers, you see nearly $10 million in transfers for this year. Those include the board's contribution from the cash reserve for the Seeger Natatorium project, a $4 million contribution or $4 million transfer from the cash reserve so that we can complete the transportation facility project, along with all of those other capital improvement projects that had already been planned in our 5-year plan. I did include it next school year in fiscal year 24 contingency to finish up the master facility plan of $1.5 million. So that is included in the long-term forecast so that if we should have to utilize those dollars to be able to complete the projects, they are included in the forecast. If we don't, they'll stay in the cash reserve. So I think that we have the funds that we need for that purpose. Hopefully we won't need to utilize all of them. So
Mrs. Weber, although we have capital or the reserve money coming out for some of these capital projects, do you then in subsequent years when these donors make the contributions, does that show coming in on revenue?
Okay, that's the next item. So this was just transfer. So the first one was those dollars that we knew we were going to fund permanently. The second item is in the advances line, which is line 5.02.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Where you see for next year, we are, or at least for this year, actually, we have included a little over $5 million in funding that would either go for the Seeger Natatorium project or those dollars from the Always an Aviator pledges that are being paid back over time. So if you look at the chart below that, you see the outflow of those funds going out this year. And then through fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 26, the dollars from the Seeger natatorium gift would be coming back to the cash reserve from their contributions. And then the Always an Aviator pledges would be coming back in the next 5 years. We won't get back everything from the Always an Aviator in the forecast timeframe, but the vast majority. Couple of the biggest donors in this area are the UC Health contract. So those dollars would be coming back in to help offset those dollars that would be forwarded at this point in time, as well as the payments from our anonymous donor are coming in over the next, I believe, this will get us through year 7 of 10 through this forecast period. So yes, the way that this is set up is that the dollars are going out now and they're coming back over at least the next 4 years of the.
And I'm sorry, Mrs. Weber, can you tell me where I would see those coming back in? Did you say in?
They are actually, you could see those dollars coming back in line 2.05 advances in revenue. And I apologize for how small this print is.
Oh,
but
the advances
if you
in.
start seeing those come back in, beginning in fiscal year 24.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that chart is on page, the very last page of the forecast, so that you'll have that for future reference and for future tracking, so that we can continue to communicate to our community how those dollars are flowing out to finalize the master facility plan.
Yes.
I think what's important in looking at this is even with these dollars coming in and going out with the monies that the board is basically loaning to the projects, as well as those additional drawdowns of the cash reserve that are permanent in nature. We are still up until the 26-27 fiscal year within our parameters for cash balance. So that's good news in terms of that parameter. So Mr. Long, would you go on to the next slide? We looked at this chart back in September so that you could see the green line is revenues coming into the district. The blue line is our operating expense based on the new 5-year forecast dollars. So you'd see that FY23, our operating revenue is still a bit above our operating expense for this point in time. But also the black line shows you what we're doing in terms of including that capital expenditure out of the cash reserve as far as our expenses are concerned. So that just gives you an idea of what the impact would be in terms of drawing that down. Still see that we're in good shape in terms of we're deficit spending because of that drawdown, but our operating expenses are not causing the deficit spending at this point in time. Looking out at when those two trends or two lines really cross each other and you start to see where our expenses are exceeding our revenue, it's fiscal year 25. So we're still in pretty good shape through fiscal year 24, which, is always one of those things that we're looking at when we're determining when the next operating levy might occur. So, given that, I would say that, probably not until at least 24. I don't know that I see a lot on the horizon that makes me think it might be much later than that, just because of the inflationary costs that we're continuing to see. But at least I think that's 1 year further out than what we had talked about before. And that's even with those drawdowns of our cash reserve to help make sure that we can meet our master facility plan, the initial plan, plus support some of these additional projects that We have been so grateful to receive those additional dollars from our community, from the Seeger family, to be able to bring
Mrs.
those
Weber,
additional.
Help me with the years a little bit though, but was it 2018 of our last operating levy?
No, it was actually 2016.
2016.
So
to
you're
which-
thinking about 8 years, and at that time, we said at least 5 years. So going beyond that by a bit, even with everything that we went through with COVID and other and the master facility plan drawdown of the reserves.
Mrs. Weber, there was quite a bit of discussion at our Capitol conference about the vouchers and the impacts that it will have on districts. Could you touch on that? In relation to this budget and your thoughts about potential costs to the district for that?
At this point, the vouchers have not impacted Sycamore directly in that we have not been deemed, because of our academic success, we have not had mandatory vouchers for our district. I think one of the concerns that we'll have to address as we work with the legislature in this next budget session is that they still need to fund public schools. So if they're going to do more direct funding of vouchers, that's, I guess, the legislature's call, but we still need to advocate that they need to adequately fund public education first and foremost. So I think the biggest impact that could have on us possibly would be just how big is the pot, and is the legislature giving us our fair share? As far as my belief is not that Sycamore necessarily will have a lot of students become voucher students and leave the district, but again, it's just how much funding is available. So if you learn something different, that would be really good to know.
What I learned is that it's possible that it may have already moved to that scenario, or it will potentially be moving to the scenario that it's not based on low performing school district, but rather just a universal waiver. So anyone who would like to get reimbursed, if they're a high school student, they would get like $7,500 reimbursement. So these are current students who live in our district who may be attending a private school. So that is the number that could potentially, impact us. That was the discussion. That was the trainings that I went to, which could, many of the suburban school, this apparently has been occurring in more urban districts, but now the concern is that it would also occur or it is occurring in suburban districts that were not necessarily underperforming in the past and now would have to pay that. So that was sort of one of the discussions that came up in one of our trainings.
Yeah.
Or actually more than one of our trainings.
Yeah, well, the last budget cycle, one of the changes that I do think was actually beneficial to us is that instead of the state is funding those scholarships directly as opposed to deducting it out of our state foundation funds. And the reason that was really good for us is that they were deducting that $7,000, but funding us at about 600. So that difference was coming out of our coffers and from local funding to that program. And with the last budget, they changed that to the state paying directly. So, it was a lot more expensive for the state to do that because they weren't getting any local funding to support those scholarships. So, my hope is that they don't go back to that. So that would be of great concern if that was something that they were looking at doing.
Mrs. Weber, is there anything that we have to do as a board or you have to do to authenticate the numbers in the 5-year forecast?
You have to vote on it.
Is that all?
And then we will have to submit it to the state of Ohio so that it can be on their website. We'll put it on our website so that our community can also look at the forecast. I may have to send Mrs. Kenyon an email so that she'll know that it's out there and available as well.
Well, thank you and your team for all your hard work on this. It's a great tool and we always glean great information from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know we've used it a couple of years, but the new format is much, much better. So
Great.
thank you.
We'll continue to work on it. And there are a lot of other features that we just haven't even gotten to yet that can help with the monthly financial reports. And there's a data feature that you can look at data from across the state and do comparisons. So those are some of the things that we need to add in our next venture into the features of this tool. And I understand, Mr. Comerford, you spent some time with the Forecast 5 people and the treasurer. So I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Yeah, I had 2 hours with the treasurer community and it was really interesting. So thank you. I did have a follow-up question and first and foremost, thank you for you and your team for this work. I find the 5-year forecast one of the most important things for the board to understand and review because it's the big picture for multiple years. And I appreciate the context of after the operating levy of 2016 that 2024 would be 8 years out. And it's your viewpoint right now that would be the right timing for an operating levy for the district?
I think that would be the earliest that you would need to go is 2024. That would start actually, if it's passed and or approved in 2024, that would impact the fiscal year 25. That would be the first impact.
So it would be on the ballot in 2024 is the best way to explain that. And then
That would be,
it would affect our
budget
budget in 2025.
Correct.
Have you had the opportunity to do any analysis on what level of millage we would be looking at if we did this in 2024, or is that still work ahead?
I have not done that at this point in time. I do think one of the things that is a bit concerning to me when you look at that is that one of the things that helped us with keeping off the ballot for 8 years the last time is that our expenditure trend was quite a bit less than what you're seeing in this forecast. And that's driven a lot by inflation, enrollment growth, strategic plan, and we've had some programming increases too with our preschool program. My hope is that this year, some of the biggest impacts because of all of those things coming in. But I do want to spend some time with Mr. Lewis and our team to really look at, are there some things we can do to slow down that trend and offset some of those inflationary pressures that we're seeing. So until we do that, I don't want to spend too much time on looking at levies. I know we've always tried to be in the 5 to 7 mil range when we have put something on the ballot. And I think that's something that would hopefully be acceptable to our community because of how long it's been since an operating levy. But I think whenever you go into that mode, you really have to make sure that you have your financial house in order and you've done what you can do to keep that cost to our taxpayers as low as possible. So
exactly. The other thing I think that you've always educated us on is that the state protects the districts from property values going down, and it protects the taxpayers if the property values go up until the next operating levy has gone in place. And since the property values have gone up pretty consistently over the last 8 years, my supposition is that the effective millage rate that our taxpayers are paying has gone down over those last 8 years. And perhaps, I'm not asking on the spot right now what the millage decline has been over the 8 years, but I think that might be a really interesting data point to review Because if the effective millage rate has gone down for taxpayers, that could help guide us on the millage rate going up, may actually be somewhat of a break even given the property value increases.
Right. Yeah, actually, you know, one of the charts that's in the report, it's on page 5. The model does do some potential impact of reappraisal on effective millage rates. Now, again, these are not set in stone, but if you look at tax year 2023 and what is probably a fairly realistic increase in our overall values of about 177 million. It was about that the last time we had a triennial update, and given how much more activity there's been in our, at least in our residential market. I mean, it takes the effective millage for operations. If that would happen, it would decrease it by almost 2.5 mils. So somewhere between 0 and probably about that rate is what this next reappraisal may do to the effective millage rate that our residents pay. So that's something that we'll have a grasp on by the end of next calendar year, what that impact would be. And my guess is, thinking about our community, and this is for residential, thinking about our community, I would say we would probably have one of the hotter real estate markets, as well as new construction that I think will impact that in a good way. So
I know when on our day that we do our retreat in the spring, it's more focused on the financial, and it would be great to do some kind of a study on the effective millage rate between 2016 and 2024 and how it has reduced, and maybe guide a conversation on what we might be looking for a 2024 operating levy.
yeah, we go through the historical information every tax budget. So in January, you'll get to see what the historical view was. And then we can probably do a kind of a sensitivity analysis on what the impact may be depending on the reappraisal in this upcoming year. So
thank you.
if you can send me a reminder of that, would be great.
It's great. And in closing, I thank you for this work, because this is essential work for us as a district. And I think the team has done an excellent job capturing everything that's gone on, not only with the pandemic, but with the construction in a way that's clear.
Thank you.
Mrs. Weber, please call a roll.
Mrs. Weiss, Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mr. Ballant,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
5-year forecast is approved. Moving on to policy project. I'll turn this over to Mrs. Weber and Mrs. Bitter to discuss how we're going to do this.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Since we had our last meeting, I hope is that you had a little bit of time, but I know we've also been very busy with OSBA and all the other things that you do as a board. But this evening, we were hoping we could get input on and have any discussion that might be needed on policies in section G, H, I, and J, which are around staffing, instruction, and students. We can have that discussion this evening. The other possibility, and even if we do have the discussion, I would like for you to send notes on any possible changes or revisions that you think we need to work on prior to completion of the entire policy manual by scheduled right now for December 21st. Kenna Haycox can be available if we would like for her to participate at our December 7th meeting to do any final revision work. But it also probably works best if we can have the discussion this evening, and then also get your individual notes on things that you would see that we need to address prior to the revision. So With that, I just open it up for discussion on any policies that you see as a critical need to review or make sure that we address potentially why the revisions were recommended either by district personnel or probably in most cases by the Ohio School Boards Association. Most of these were looked at just to make sure we were in compliance with Ohio Revised Code, with other federal law, and also just to make sure that our policies are aligning with our current practice. So with that, does anyone want to start the discussion or policies that you'd like for us to relook at?
Can I just clarify what you said before? Because we are kind of in this weird like vortex of this line. So I just want to make sure are we also reviewing D?
We can also
F.
bring, if you have comments on DNF, anything that you feel you want to have revised and have us bring back potential revision on December 7th. So discussion, if it's something that you think the board may have differing opinions that we want to have discussion, or if you have recommendations based on what you've potentially seen as something that isn't aligned with how we want to operate here in the district.
Why don't we start just with each section?
Okay.
We want to start by section D. Does anybody have any comments or suggestions on section D?
Yes, I do. Okay, so I have one on DA. I know we talked about this at our last meeting, but I think we all agreed that we do need to add the section of the 25% of the district's general fund operating expenditures. So is that change going to be made? Because it was still in yellow on Kenna's chart. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that. You want me to go down the list or what would be most helpful?
I think it would be good if she just
Yeah,
went
I
down the
think she
list.
did have
Yeah,
that
you
in her
I should?
notes.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
Okay, so then the next one, I was fine with all of them up to DFA, which is revenues from investments. And I just had a more of a clarifying question. It's under scope. It reads, the board directs that the investing authority of the district resides with its treasurer. Mrs. Weber, can you just explain to me and to our community what investing, what does that actually mean that you do as a treasurer for the district?
It's a couple things. One, it would be just looking at the cash flow of the district to make sure we are not investing more funds that we would have than what we would have available at that point in time. So I have to look at what are the cash flow needs for the current year. You can invest up to a 5-year period of time, and it has to be within a list of, extremely low risk investment vehicles that are approved by the state of Ohio. The other thing that you look at is, for example, over the last couple of years, we did very little long-term investing because we were expecting the market to go up. So we weren't making a lot of money, but it made so those funds were available now that interest rates have gone up. So we're looking at it a little bit differently now in trying to lock in some of those higher rates. So it's a balance of making sure you have really safe investments and that you have the money available and liquidity that you need. So when you have to pay the bills, those dollars are available. And then once you get through those two items, trying to actually capture as much investment revenue that you can. So safety, liquidity, and then income, you can get that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else on D?
Couple questions on. I could not find policy DJF-R. And I'm not sure. That was
Purchasing procedures.
purchasing procedures.
Okay.
I looked in D2.
Okay, so we'll find you a copy of that.
Okay, I mean, I know that wasn't one of the ones highlighted, but I went through all of them.
Okay.
And then on policy DJH, purchasing, can you explain to me what a purchasing card is and why we went towards those instead of getting rid of credit cards? First, for, I'm assuming
Well,
administrators.
we don't have credit cards now. What we're looking at is getting purchasing cards, which is they're not a lot different, but Ohio Revised Code treats them differently just because of the level of control. So our plan is to put a purchasing card program into place, get everyone used to it and what controls are needed, and then potentially at some point look at having what's deemed a credit card policy. So in a lot of ways, it's the same, but it is different in who can use them and the controls around them. So the comments that are in the summary document is not that we're getting rid of them. We don't have them now. It's just that we're not looking at starting a program that falls under Ohio Revised Code for credit cards.
Okay. And then my last one on the D section was just on DLC-R expense reimbursements. Meal rate reimbursement was $30 on version D1 and 40 on D2. So I'm assuming it's what's on D2. Is that correct?
Is that what?
It's the D2 version that I should be looking
Yeah.
at. Okay, meal rate is $40 a day reimbursement. Okay.
Yeah,
It
my
is
question-
unless you can get a special approval if you're going to go to a national conference. Sometimes there are a lot of places that you can't eat breakfast for $30 a day.
No, right. I just wanted
So
to,
that is something
right.
that there is some opportunity for whoever your budget manager is to
Yeah,
increase.
I had a
that amount.
question on this as well. Do we need to set a dollar amount in policy? Because that could change year over year. Do we just,
Well, R is actually the procedure regulation, so that probably could be, Mrs. Moore, would that have to be in board policy based on maybe what an auditor would want to see?
I would ask Kenna about that. I would try to steer away from a fixed dollar amount, see if there's a way around that. I do like something about, decided or discussed or decided by the treasurer or something like that, or even similar to, we approve mileage every year at a certain rate. Do you approve a meal allowance? I don't know, but it just seems like it'd be difficult to change policy if inflationary costs go up and down.
Have it be maybe more in a procedure or something, Mr. Ballant?
What's that?
Is that you're thinking of having the number in a procedure or something
Yeah.
instead of a policy? Yeah,
Instead of a board policy, yeah.
that's all I have on D.
Right, let's move on to F then.
Oh, does anyone else have anything on D? Okay. Moving on to F.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to hog the,
No, you can go
Just-
first. I
okay.
have a couple.
I just had a couple on actually policy FF naming facilities. Hold on, let me just get to my notes are so cryptic. I can't understand my own notes that I wrote down. Hold on one second. I think the issue or the question I had on this was there was a section on the 4th paragraph which indicates that it reads, I'll just read it in case you guys don't have it brought up. It says the board will consider the naming of newly renovated structures, auditoriums, athletic surfaces or facilities, libraries, theaters, or newly constructed buildings or other areas as deemed appropriate by the board, naming of classrooms or classroom groupings such as halls, wings, or portions of a building will be at the discretion of the building principal or his or her designee. If the name is based on the functionality of the building or in support of a program or educational objective. That was a kind of surprise to me that we've given that authority to the building principal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't know that we want individual classrooms and, halls and wings named. I would strike that whole part.
I think going back to thinking about when this originally went into place, I don't know if that had to do with naming any of those things for a person, or, I think it may have even been as granular as the green wing, the white wing, the orange wing, all of those things that green. But it sounds like there's not clarity around what the intent of that was, so we can clean that up. I don't know that you want all of those to come to the board. Maybe if it's for a specific person, you do.
Person or corporation, I wouldn't rule
yeah.
out businesses.
Yeah, I agree with Mrs. Weber. I don't think that it was meant, that was meant to be, the naming of any facility was supposed to have very strict, a very strict
I just don't think it's
interpretation.
clear.
And this was more supposed to be like, this is the gray wing, this is the white wing, this is the orange wing. So yeah, we'll clarify that.
Okay, but we'll clean that up and get some clarity around that one. Okay. That was, we only had two on F, so.
FF, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else.
That's all I have in F.
All right, so section G, any questions on section G? Much of this really came from looking at compliance with state law or federal law.
I have a few.
Okay.
Okay, policy GBE-R. Just why do we have it listed that only classified employees to pass physical exam? What about certified employees?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
We have listed classified employees to pass a physical exam. Why do we make the distinction between that is just classified employees versus certified, or are we using that term differently in the policy?
The one group of classified employees that do have to pass a physical exam are our transportation, our bus drivers. So that is a requirement for them. I can check with Ken on whether, or Ms. Hickox, whether there's other reason, or maybe we do need to provide some clarity, but I do know the one group that does have to have a physical exam is our bus drivers. So I don't know if it should be limited just to that.
Also and maybe this is something that's coming from a specific thing from a state office, but I don't know why we're spelling marijuana with an H and then putting marijuana in parentheses with a J. Also, the last paragraph, let's see here. I'm looking at a different one. Something about prescribed medication. Hold on one second. I'm sorry, I just feel like there was an issue about a controlled substance prescribed by a physician. I'm just trying to find it here, sorry.
You can always send them an email if you.
Okay.
And any of these, if there are notes that you want to send to us to help clarify, that would be great as well.
And then I think on the next one I had was GBK. It was smoking on school premises by staff members. And I think that there were, if I understand, there were two versions of this policy. And I think one of them was very vague and didn't actually specifically say that it was prohibited, but I think it was the version in D1 that was clear to me that it is prohibited.
Is this, I think one of the issues is it might be in conflict with our collective bargaining agreement, because at this point in time, we still do have designated areas. We're not a smoke-free campus. This was GBK. We would like to be, but we're not yet.
Yeah, and if I recall, Mrs. Weber, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of researched this back to the fact that two things. One, giving them a place not far off campus because essentially people were coming back late to work. If I recall putting the pieces together when we went through this, because we've been through it in multiple bargaining sessions with our staff, that it would create an environment where they're walking away from work or getting off campus and doing those things. And I think that's why we're not there yet.
Is that something that we can maybe make a note of for our next bargaining?
We
with
can
both
talk about
unions,
that
talk
next
about
time.
that as just an issue.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, I mean, if we can't put it in the policy of prohibiting, maybe the other one that I read was more of a kind of a highly discouraged because we're trying to promote a healthy environment or something like that, which makes sense if we cannot put it as a prohibited thing because it has to be bargained.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure you all see that at the top, it does say health professionals have determined that smoking poses health hazards. We do the disclaimer, of course, at the top, but I do remember this, and we, wished that we could make it 100% smoke-free, but just with our labor negotiated agreements, but also just teacher shortages, we were trying to be aware of that as well.
All right.
Yeah, I have a question on GCBE. It says that all vacation for the office, or for the district office staff, I guess, the professionals, administrators, is approved by the superintendent. Is that true? They're not necessarily approved by their immediate boss?
ECB 2. Professional staff.
Yeah, it's the second line, and maybe that is the process, but is that how we do it? All vacation is submitted to the superintendent for approval?
Yeah, during the
But like if
contract year.
somebody works for Mr. Lovell, they would go through Mr. Lovell or they would go through you?
Superintendent designee.
Yeah, I just want to make clarification to make sure we're following our policy. So designee or direct supervisor or something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not all through the superintendent. It's, there are department leaders that approve their staff members. I get the district office directors and principals. So I think adding or designee would make sense.
Just another small technical or a question actually on GBR-R, family and medical leave. Is work week one word? Is that like a phrase that's used in work week is one word? That
I'm
means
sorry,
something.
what was the question?
There's a word in that policy that's work week, which is one, it's listed as
Okay.
one word, but is it really just the work week? Or is that something different?
No, I think we'll have to look at that one.
Just, sorry, just like
So you think it may be a typo?
I can't get the English major out of myself, so.
I Googled it. It's one word,
Okay.
or at least
I don't
Google
trust
says
Google.
it is.
And I was looking at GDBB, support staff pupil activity contracts. It talks about that they're 1-year contracts, and it says that the board provides written notice of non-renewal on or before June 1st of each year. Just a question if that's really what we're doing, or if that's the way the policy needs to be. Is it something that we can automatically terminate like supplementals?
They are automatically non-renewed every year, right? So
So is that the written renewal? Just, do we need to put in there, the board provides written notice of non-renewal on or before June 1st of each year?
We do provide them written notice.
Okay.
So, yeah, so each year after all of those non-renewals are approved, we do send notification.
Okay. All my questions on G.
Yeah, I'm done with G. as
I
well.
have a question on G, and this is specific to the GBA policy and the reference that kind of provided, which was helpful on the law.cornell.edu about citizenship status. And I think that article makes a lot of sense, but it's really about national origin not being considered. But the use of citizenship status then goes on to say in that article, and I'm pulling it up, it says, and I don't like the words, but it says, exactly, it said, it is unfair immigration related employment practice for a person or other entity to discriminate against any individual other than an unauthorized alien as defined in section 1234A with respect to the hiring. And so, and then point A says because of an individual's national origin, which I think is clear. And then it says in the case of a protected individual, because of such an individual's citizenship status, and then it goes on in section 3 to highlight that citizenship status with a huge clause in B. And I'm not proposing that we put this huge clause in, but citizenship status to me is unclear language without all of this explanation behind it. And I'm wondering, and I want to make sure we're compliant with law, number one, but the citizenship status has a kind of a dual perception upon reading. Are they authorized or unauthorized is one of the ways you could read that, which I think is confusing.
Okay.
And I think the intent here is not to discriminate based on national origin. And I'm wondering if using the words national origin would be as clear or clearer than citizenship status. So if you could follow up on that.
Okay, yeah, I remember we discussed that to some extent when Miss Haycox was here. Reviewed it with us, but let's see if there's anything. I know she was very clear that this
They're
was
two
rooted
different
in law. So.
things. National origin, the origin that you are coming from, and then status is, but they're two different things. Because you could have a green card and have a visa to work.
Which is
And that's a
perfectly fine.
status, that's a citizen status indicator. But you could be from Japan and then become a citizen of the United States.
Yeah,
And that's your national origin. So
what I'm trying to make sure is clear to anyone reading the policy is that they have an authorization to work in the United States.
but you have to in order to be able to work here. So that part,
That's to be compliant with law. to do that.
sure. So that is, this is about equal opportunity employment, but to work here, maybe there's something under employment. Like clearly to work here, you have to be eligible to work here, meaning you have to have the status, you have to have the ability, or you have to have a visa, or there has to be some permission, or you have to,
Perhaps
have,
the language I'm looking for is this in
I don't-
one general rule that says other than an unauthorized alien as defined in section 1234 AH3 of this title. That's the part that I think is somehow missing here.
is what you're looking at related to equal opportunity, or is it related to employment, just
More
being able to employment?
More employment.
Okay, because maybe under one of our, yeah, maybe we can have a separate line that just
I just, the
clearly,
confusion comes from citizenship status, I think can be interpreted in more than one way.
So maybe we can,
but we're not hiring people illegally.
no, I think what
That's a
Mr.
separate-
Comerford
that's a
is saying,
separate- That's not equal opportunity. That is following the law and employing people properly. So maybe a separate
I-
policy even.
agree that we are not hiring people, but I think that this language to me is unclear and raises that question. Are we authorizing to hire against the law when we say, and I'm not trying to be, I just want to make sure the language is as clear as it can be for people reading it.
Okay.
Could we
I do
perhaps-
believe that would be an HR. I do believe we should have Dr. Davis because she was in on this. She would absolutely have to look at that because that's getting into some territory that we want to be sure.
Why
we're
don't we put it
doing
on the
well
list to
that.
come back to?
If we can just
Yep.
come back to this, I
to
read
Anna
the
and-
reference document in clarity and it has specific exclusions under citizenship status, which we don't include here. And I don't want to make this a huge legal document, but I also don't want it to be misinterpreted either.
All right.
I'm wondering, I think what you're saying, Mr. Comerford, is to have more of a definition about what citizen status means. And I think by just having that phrase there without the background information, it can be interpreted in many different ways.
Yeah, if there's a clean and easy way to further define what the intent is here, and I think the intent is that we are equal opportunity and following the law on our hiring practices, both. But I'm going to take this as a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on,
H.
H was pretty short and sweet. Anything from H?
Wait, hold on. Now I have good and check mark, so I think we're fine on that.
Excellent. Moving on to I. This is a little bit longer one. I have a question on IA on instructional goals. It says in number 5 that we're instilling students with a knowledge of social and natural sciences, history, technology, arts, and engineering. How about things like mathematics and language arts? And, why are we just calling out those particular subjects?
Okay.
I also had to add mathematics. It does say computing on some other section, but I think we should add mathematics to number 5.
I would agree. IA, yep. Particularly number 5 on there.
So if you have suggested revision, if you could pass that along.
I will, yep.
I have a question on policy IGBB, programs for students who are gifted. And I'm hoping that Ms. Tompkins and Ms. Wagner can maybe assist you with this. IGBB, so there's a huge section in here about clarifying who needs a WEP. And is this policy as it is written aspirational? Right. And so just based on previous experience in the district, I had 2 children in the district for years and I saw WEP twice. So my question is, I'm trying to prevent us, I know the Department of Education requires us to have a WEP on every student who's receiving gifted services. Are we doing that? We are. And parents are signing that and they know that their child has a WEP.
So do we need to modify the policy so it doesn't say parents are signing them, that are just parents receiving them? Or is your process going to be that a parent will sign it and send it back and you're going to keep these records?
So what I'm hearing is we probably need to spend some time on the policy and procedures to make sure that it's being properly implemented. Or if there's anything that isn't required by law, that there might be a different approach to how it's included in the policy. We may want to do that as well. Okay, so that's something we need to have on our list between now and December 7th. So if there are other things, Mrs. Weiss, that you feel we need to address, please let us know.
Okay, thanks.
What's next in
Um,
section I?
I have, excuse me, I have IGCA summer schools. VA. Make sure I'm in the right section here. Students in grades kindergarten through 12. Question, we have listed. We have summer school is under the direction of a principal appointed by the board. I'm thinking about our summer school programs and I know, names are coming into my brain, but I don't think they are principals. Or do we assign a teacher as a principal in the summer, or is it really a principal?
It is a summer school director that is assigned to oversee the kindergarten through 4th, 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12. I oversee them from a district perspective, but they are the boots on the ground administrator, for lack of a better term, but we don't call them principals. We call them summer school directors.
Okay, so we just need to clean up that language then. I think when somebody reads this, they think,
That's
you
fair.
know,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep. Thank you.
I have a question on IGDJ, interscholastic athletics. I don't like the sentence that says the board takes great pride in winning. I would just like to strike that part, and we could say the board emphasizes and requires good sportsmanship. I'm not comfortable saying that using winning in there.
Yeah, if you can just make sure if you can send that suggested change, I think that's a good one.
We removed, policy IGCB, innovative education programs, and it says it's removed, not reflective of practice. So I guess I don't need to see that if we're removing
We're
it.
removing it, yeah.
Right, we're removing it from our,
Okay. IGCI. I found that in, let's see here, hold on. Forget that.
IGDK, this was one that the board was open for, requested some more information on interscholastic extracurricular eligibility. There was a discussion around, do we want to have prohibit students from participating if they have an F or if they have below a 1.0 GPA. So I believe that the administration was going to bring back some additional information.
Yeah, just a little bit of data for you. Just a quick check of GMC schools. No school in the GMC has an F policy, a no F policy. All of them follow the OHSAA guidelines for participation. Doing an analysis of our student athletes, we had 6 students that participated that would have been out with an F out of 324 high school students. Of those students, a student that would have been out for an F has a 3.64 GPA because of a failure of an AP course. But under a no F policy, that student would have been unable to participate with a 3.64 GPA. So by OHSAA and state standards, that student would have been eligible. 4 additional students would have been ineligible because of the no F policy. All of them have cumulative GPAs of 2.3 or higher. But again, with an F policy, they would have been excluded from participation. And then just another student that would have been ineligible had a prior GPA prior to that issue, an issue of an F this quarter, had above a 2.16. So just looking at our environment, it doesn't seem to be a major issue, but my recommendation would be we stay in alignment with the OHSAA guidelines. And certainly we continue to work with our students. We want our students to be successful, but I think negating participation by straying away from the OHSAA policies and guidelines would be detrimental to our student athletes. based on that work.
Yeah, I'm okay with the 1.0 GPA.
I am too.
Thank you for the follow-up, Mr. Lewis. I'm aligned.
I take zero credit. Mr. Lovell and Mr. Harden collected it. I just read it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I have a question on IKA grading systems. It doesn't talk anywhere in there about uniformity of a grading system across the district. And is that something that should be in there? That we expect all teachers to utilize the same grading scales and the same grading systems, or are we allowing teachers to do their own grading systems?
So there is, some flexibility obviously with grading systems, but I will tell you, we are currently digging into some of that work and having some discussions internally. So I would not want to put any language at this point to restrict teachers from having some flexibility in grading, but it is a discussion that we're having to try to bring more consistency, especially across common classes. Like at the high school level, for example, if I'm in English 9 with one teacher and English 9 with another teacher, we do want some commonalities and consistency in the way grading is handled across that. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
No,
Mrs.
I
Weiss.
wasn't commenting. I thought that was the end of that. Go ahead, finish.
Yeah, so part of that work also looks at, we are using consistent grading scales. If you were in terms of at the high school, what percentages are A, B, C, D, and so on. So that's part of that grading system piece. If you're looking at it from a 30,000 foot level as opposed to the individual teacher level. But to Mr. Lewis's point, that's some of the work we're doing at the high school, is to bring some consistency within the departments, if you will, from some of those teacher by teacher practices.
Okay.
I had an IGDJ, interscholastic. It's just more of a typo. We have something related to like his, her. And if we can just not list it that way and make it either more generic or just have his, her, they, just to be sensitive to people's pronouns. I have two questions, same question for two policies, IIAB and IIAC. These were supplementary material selection and adoption and library material selection and adoption. Were those incorporated somewhere else in the policies?
I think we'll have to look at that. It looks like they may have been. Let me look at that. I'll have to get back with you on that one where they're included in the policy elsewhere, because I think they are.
I had a question on policy IKF, graduation requirements. The PE section seemed vague to me on the section in the last sentence where it says, well, it says beginning in the 2019-20 school year, a student who during high school has participated in show choir for at least 2 full seasons is not required to complete any physical education courses as a condition to graduate. However, the student is required to complete 1/2 unit consisting of at least 60 hours of instruction in another course of study. What does that mean, another course of study? Is that a PE class or what is that? Okay, thank you. And then policy IKFB, graduation exercises. I just wanted clarification in reading that. It talks about students with disabilities on individual IEPs may, as determined by their IEP team, participate in commencement exercises without having met the graduation requirements. their diploma will be held until the date that the graduation requirements have been met. Is this something that other students can participate in if they don't have an IEP? Or is this an issue for students with disabilities who don't officially take their diploma, but they walk through ceremonies because they feel part of that class and then they stay in our services afterwards? Okay, so then I think that's not written correctly. The way I read it, is that what, I think what you're saying is different than what's written here. Okay, so can you just say it again, Mrs. Spencer, so I have it in my brain? Have met. Okay, so so we need to correct that in our, okay, thank you.
So I'll work with Mrs. Spencer to make sure that's aligns. with
This
that
one,
practice.
yeah, it says may, it does say may participate, or excuse me, it may participate even if they did not meet the requirements. I know you don't have it right in front of you, Mrs. Spencer, but I don't know if that's something technical that we had to add or, but as a practice, we do not. But I don't know, we probably need to check that with Kenna to see if that's something we had. I mean, what if they miss it by like, a half a credit or something? And then. Okay, got it. So we don't do it anyhow, but I guess we just have to check if we had
Yeah,
to make it
please
that way.
check that and just make sure our policy is saying what our practice is.
All right.
I did not have any more on I.
I'm done on I.
On to J.
We're on to J. We're in the home stretch, you guys.
I did not have any on J.
I had on J, policy JECBD, intra-district open enrollment version 2. It says, sorry, hold on, let me try to bring this up here. My notes made a lot of sense when I was writing them, but now when I look at them again, I'm like, what does that mean? Okay, so it says here, JE. Okay, it's only in D1.
Was it something different than what the summary says, which is basically that we do require annual application for intra-district open enrollment?
Yeah, I didn't see it. Well, it said confirmed students must apply annually, and I didn't see that in the policy.
Okay.
Maybe I missed it, but
Make
I
sure
read it
that's in
3
there.
times. So it has things about changing address changes within 30 days, but I didn't see anything about having to apply annually for that.
Okay.
And then JED, student absences and excuses. Excuses. Authenticate the language here. Okay. Excuses. Absolutely correct. In the second section, is there a way that we can remove the term truly held with truly held religious beliefs? I don't really know how we would ascertain that or prove that or justify that. What's truly held or not. I don't know if anyone else has.
I don't know how we evaluate that, so.
Thank you.
Okay. That's probably a carryover from old language, so we may just need to relook at that.
Okay, and then I think the last one that I have is JGD, student suspension. And I just wanted to talk about we remove the language allowing for appeal of suspension to the board related to suspensions, and it ends at the superintendent level, or it can go to court. And I didn't know if this was based on like ODE policies, or if that's something that we believed and how that fits in with our kind of our hierarchy of appeal in the district, or what the thought process is for that. And so, Mr. Lewis, since you're the superintendent, I'm looking at you for that.
It was more, it was more along the lines of our legal counsel and the advice that they have given us about process and practice of levels of appeals, who should be hearing them. And then we designate, I think, on the board agenda, I think we've designated who is the board's designee for those hearings. And that when that happens, it allows it to not have to come to the board for, and as you know, getting 5 people together in a room to have a hearing would be very difficult versus just having someone that's designated to do that hearing on your behalf. So.
And was that legal advice from Mr. Lampy? Okay, then I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, so you would like us to summarize those comments and send it
Yes,
to you?
that would be great if you could send those so that we can forward those to Kenna at OSBA just to help us with any revisions that we might need. We'll try to get those turned around before the December 7th meeting so that you can see the final product and tell us to move
Is it-
forward with those
Is it
revisions.
realistic to ask the board to forward those comments to Mrs. Weber by Friday?
That would be great.
This Friday?
Yes.
Okay.
We haven't done enough board work this week. What's a few more hours? Okay, we will move on to personnel consent agenda. And I need a motion for the personnel consent agenda, which includes addendum 2D, E, F, and 3E.
So moved.
Second. Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter
Aye.
and Dr. Steger.
Aye.
Personnel consent agenda is approved. Moving on to other Board of Education business. It is getting to be the end of the year and we're looking at the 2023 organizational meeting and meeting schedule. We are not voting on this tonight. This is what's being proposed. Any comments from Mrs. Weber or Mr. Lewis?
And we've just gone through our typical schedule as we've had in the past. One of the things that Mr. Lovell included in our slides is that we are looking at and considering, instead of having our evening meetings here at Mapledale, moving them out to one of our new community spaces out at Sycamore High School. So it'd be more centrally located within the district, really set up, as you can see from the pictures, to accommodate Board of Education meetings, along with many other activities for students and communities. So is there is anyone opposed to that? Are we okay?
And I know our colleagues that sit on these hard plastic seats are excited about backs of those chairs. So that was the one piece of negative feedback that I got from the retreat was, please give us regular adult sized chairs.
Accurate. No, I think it'd be a great idea to have a meeting space at the high school that we could utilize.
I agree. And I think, I remember when I took a tour of the space before the chairs were even in, they were saying that they're trying to teach, talk to students about civic engagement and trying to looking at this as a community room for the students, obviously, and for the community. So I think it's a great addition that we have been able to build in our district. So let's use it.
And my only question on the meetings is the July 5th meeting, knowing that it's right after the day after the holiday. So, maybe that's something we think about and discuss in January.
I just would like to make a couple of comments if that's okay right now. I'm going to read a statement that I wrote because I'm the one who's been asking for possibly moving toward evening meetings instead of having a split between morning and evening. So I'm going to read now. Nearly every one of our peer school districts conducts their school board meetings in the evening. I am certain that there are some members of the Sycamore community who find it simpler to attend morning meetings, but you have all seen that we get considerably more members of the community at evening meetings. And fortunately, all our meetings are broadcast and recorded. However, scheduling morning meetings is clearly a barrier for many or even most people who need to plan around their career, particularly in cases where they don't have the schedule flexibility or those not working, or in careers that offer flexibility to be absent half a day here and there. I have seen it be a challenge to some of you, and I know that board service is not an option for people in many careers. Switching all of our meetings to one consistent time in the evenings opens up the opportunity to a greater proportion of our community. I think we all agree that a deeper pool of candidates is in the best interests of the district. Stop there.
So is it your proposal then to change all the meetings to evening meetings? Is that what you're asking the board?
That's what I'm asking for, yes.
I think that part of the challenge in doing that is, the purpose of a morning meeting is more of a work session. Yes, there are parliamentary things that we do, but it's a work session to include administrators that come in. So we would then be asking administrators to give up additional evening time every single month to come to evening meetings. So I think that would be a challenge to our administrators.
I'm also suggesting that if those people who are not in business or working from home have a more challenging time with scheduling when they have to, they have different priorities at work and different scheduling opportunities at work.
Yeah, so I actually went back and looked, and we do have very few participation live streaming at both our evening and our morning meetings. But if you look at the number of views, they are pretty consistent where people are going back and looking at them. But even on live streaming on our evening meetings is pretty similar to our morning meetings.
I also like to say that the reason why we have one meeting in the morning and one meeting in the evening, to elaborate on what Mr. Ballant said, one of the reasons is our morning sessions have been more geared toward being a work session, but I think that it's also to accommodate everyone in our community. Not everyone in our community is a white collar worker. We have a lot of people who work swing shifts, and having a meeting time in the morning and one in the evening allows everyone the possibility to attend at least one of those possibly. And I think we also need to be sensitive to the amount of extra time outside the normal workday that we are expecting from our administrators, teachers, and staff. And taking 2 evenings a month from them, I think is asking a little too much for all the hard work that they do. In addition, the expectations of meeting times and the frequency were clearly explained during school board candidates prior to the election year. So I think that it's the expectation was set at the beginning, and I think that we need to do this for our community.
This is something that, through all of you here on the board, I'm really trying to listen to everyone's perspective and understand, sort of the pros and the cons. I will say that I met people at the Capitol Conference that were on boards that only met in the evenings. I met some people who were actually teachers who were on school boards, maybe not for their district, but they worked in another district, but they were only able to do that because their meetings were in the evenings. I absolutely see the benefit of doing a morning and an evening meeting. I think that helps our administrators in the district office to be able to fully engage in that meeting. And I think it's a great idea. And I've been in this district for long enough. To me, it's almost just feels like a natural, course of business. But I do think what Dr. Steger is just asking that we consider and have this conversation it's valid and it's good and it's important. It is challenging for people who may want to serve on this board, who do not have the ability to take off a half of a day, but would like to serve and they would like to be on the board. So we are limiting our pool of people who could do public service, and be on this board. I think it makes a challenge and it shuts down a little bit there. I also think that having morning meetings, even for a district office, you're not doing, we have a lot of work going on and you're using that work to time also to be at a board meeting instead of doing your normal workday schedule. So there's some pros and some cons to that, obviously, that morning time. So I will just say that I'm not, out of respect for Dr. Steger and for bringing this up, I'm supportive of you and I understand what you're saying. I think it's challenging me to think differently because my tendency would be to say, yes, we absolutely should have a morning and we absolutely should have an evening. I like that, right? But it really is challenging me to think, who are we excluding by doing that? I think that's why a lot of districts throughout the state of Ohio do evening only. There's a reason for that. So I'm not, I guess, I'm one of those people that doesn't like to change things in the middle of a school year. But I think this is something we should continue to have a conversation about.
Yeah, we can't
We
change the middle school. This is a proposal for next.
Yes, yeah. So, we don't have to, I guess, is there a way to continue this conversation? Or maybe, Mr. Comerford, you have something to say too, but that's where I am right at this exact moment. I just like that we're having this conversation. I think it's important and I think it's something we should have.
I don't think we're voting tonight on this. And so my input would be that each of us take the time to talk to staff, administrators, principals, and see if we see any opinion from our constituents on this topic, and try to do our own assessment. I have already started to do that. But I would maybe encourage everyone to do that. We're not voting on this until January, but I think that would be a prudent path forward for this.
I'd just like to say one other thing, though. I think that Dr. Steger, maybe I have a question more. In your statement, are you suggesting that there are people that would potentially think of serving as a board member if the meetings were only in the evening?
I think you would have a different type of person who could then serve. Instead of, some people are able to pull up on their computers while they're at the table what's going on at work immediately. Whereas some people are unable to do that because they have to actually physically be there. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think
I hope you're not insinuating that we're sitting here working on our computers.
No, I'm just saying you can though, technically, theoretically do that. I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying you could be able to
sit here and work on
I think the way I see it is if you have a job where you have to check in at a certain time and check out at a certain time, and you do not have flexibility on your schedule, you would be limited from serving on this board. I mean, that's
challenge
for sure. We are excluding a very particular type of person, worker in that regard, right? We are, it's for sure. So that's really what this is.
I
think that's what she was trying to say.
I think there's a little bit of a flaw in that assumption, because I think, let's take an example, is if we made a decision to only have evening meetings, are you suggesting that the type of person who could not attend only evening meetings would not be adequate to serve on this board?
I'm not saying that, no.
So I guess I'm just wondering, what other group of people are we potentially not considering or not making available the opportunity to run for school board because we have a morning and an evening meeting? I think it's the exact same argument of why you would not want to have just evening meetings.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to clarify on the flexibility point. I don't have the flexibility to not take vacation to serve. So I take at least 10 days of vacation, 12 half days a year to be able to do it in the morning meetings, the 2 all-day retreats. the 2 days at the OSBA. So I reserve 10 of my personal vacation days to serve in the morning. So would it be less vacation for me to spend if we did all in the evening? Yes, it would. But I think I just go back to what I said before. I think let's check with the people that will all be impacted by this, our administration, our staff, and our community, and see what we can do to understand that. I think we need to do it with who we're serving in mind as much as possible.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I would agree. It's more who we're serving than who could run for the board. It's more important to our
Okay, then I would
But
ask
your
that we.
board is your community.
Yes, I would ask that we consider that the board is the community also, and that we represent different constituents also. And that we need to consider potentially not asking certain people to resign because their schedule is different and they only get 2 personal days of an entire year.
So,
I would just like to say, Mr. Ballin, if I could just interrupt for a moment. I do think that we can all agree that the students, the staff, and our community of Sycamore deserves 5 fully committed board members that work diligently for them, consistently for them, and make this district a priority.
So you're saying some people don't have a right to have a job and serve on the board. That's the summary there.
No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, myself, Mr. Ballant, Mr. Comerford, all have full-time jobs and all take vacation or work their schedules with their employer to make serving on the Sycamore School Board a priority.
Again, you're in
Yeah,
fields
I think
that
that
are
the best
flexible.
interest here is that we, as Mr. Comerford said, look at our schedules, talk to our community members. This will be voted on in January. We can hold a healthy discussion and a respectful discussion then. We will bring forward in January the current proposal that we have here, and then we will discuss it as well. And then that'll be the time where we vote and make a decision what we're doing.
Speaking of that meeting, the organizational meeting, we were looking at having that on January 5th. Will that work for all the board members?
5th or the 4th? It says the 4th on here.
Okay.
It would be January 4th,
What's the day? Does anyone know the day? Is that a-
Wednesday, January
Wednesday.
4th.
Okay.
And that is, typically we don't have meetings if our students are not in session. That is the first day back in session, I believe. So that is typically when we would have it, is that date. And to push that back, you really start to get in back-to-back board meetings at the end of January into February. So I would say if everyone can make January 4th, that we hold that date for the organizational meeting.
I can make myself available for January 4th at 7 p.m.
As can I.
Same here.
Dr. Steers.
Same.
Okay, so we will keep that,
Okay.
and then we will vote on the evening, or we will vote on the meeting schedule for that. Legislative liaison report.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. Oh, is it almost 10 o'clock? Okay.
Yes.
All right, under a state law that goes into effect next year, schools across Ohio will administer a one-time dyslexia screening for all students in grades K through 3. After that, all kindergarten students are going to be screened each school year, as well as transfer students that have not been screened. Any student between 1st and 6th grade can be evaluated for dyslexia at the request of a parent or teacher. The State Board of Education's Executive Committee approved sending an updated resolution opposing the federal expansion of Title IX protections that would include members of the LGBTQ+ community to the full Ohio School Board of Education. The State Board of Education is set to hear additional public comments in the coming weeks. I believe their first session was Monday, where they started hearing comments. A vote is not expected until next month. Congratulatory emails have been sent to our elected state representatives. Congratulations to Jessica Miranda, who got reelected to represent Ohio District 28. And congratulations to Rachel Baker, who got elected for the first time to represent Ohio District 27. We will work to schedule a meeting with Ms. Baker in the new year as she takes on her new role. We have already met with Representative Miranda. So congratulations again to Jessica Miranda and Rachel Baker. That's all I have.
And Dr. Stickers, did we have a SAC update or?
There is no SAC update because it happened 2 nights ago, and they had a working session and I was asked not to attend so they could get
That's-
some stuff done.
That's what I thought. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
And a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the opening of Green on the 21st. I hope everyone can attend and that it's well represented by our community. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.